was,
I don't know, I've read a lot of books since then, so.
I've read a lot of books since then, but I remember, I know, because this really was, it came out last summer. And I think you came in, I gave one to you and to Bill.
Yeah.
But anyway, he talks about his dream for, you know, choice and all of this, and like letting schools turn into learning centers, and
Yes.
what's happening because of COVID. Like, it's just funny. I don't think he ever dreamed that. All right, I gotta shoot Sharon. She couldn't find the link. I'm gonna send it to her. Hold on. Be right back.
And we'll get started here in 1 minute.
All right.
Yeah, just as we do have viewers starting to come in, hello, Stephen, again from New Hampshire. Glad you're back with us. I want you guys, if you would, maybe put your names and contact info in the chat. So as we're starting to enter in the room, everyone, I want you to know that all of our panelists' contact information will be in the chat if you want to follow up with them directly, or as many did last week, you can follow up with me if you have additional questions. But we have some great questions for our panelists that came in, very thoughtful questions. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. Tonight, that's what we're going to do. We're going to have a conversation about your questions. My name is Felix Alvarado, the director of Straight A Academy. My students call me Mr. A. We're here with our panelists, Frank Edelblut, the Commissioner of Education from state of New Hampshire, Dr. Richard Brake of St. Michael Academy up north, and Diane Murphy from Big Fish Learning Community in Dover, and Sharon Harris, also Big Fish and independent education consultant herself. So we have a great array of perspective tonight again, and I do want to let everyone know tonight's format. We're going to, well, first of all, I do want to mention that we had viewers from over 5 different, I think at least 5 states, and so we're excited to have you all here from every state possible. But we will be focusing tonight on New Hampshire law, and the commissioner is going to give us some insight as to how that will apply specifically in New Hampshire. Of course, there will be a lot of carryover into your state. If you have additional specific questions about education law in your state, you'll need to contact your Department of Education. But at any rate, focusing on New Hampshire tonight in terms of legality, but certainly the takeaways I have from last week, I wanted to start out by mentioning those and get right into our questions. For me, one of my takeaways was it seems there was a big consensus that if smaller schools and or learning communities tends to allow for more individualized learning, both in terms of curriculum and pace. And I love that Diane says that, you're not behind. You're not behind in your instruction. You're not behind in your curriculum. You're right where you need to be. And we can, as educators, carry our kids forward at their pace. And kids need more options and more choices in terms of what applies best to their style of learning, in terms of their situation in life. We talked about how some kids have thrived in the staying at home mode and others have not done so well. So if you have a situation in your school and your child is not doing well, we want to make sure that we address your questions tonight so that you can know best how to act in your situation where you are in your state, in your community. So let's start tonight. Let me start out by asking, I want to throw this out to Commissioner of Education Frank Edelblut. I want to know, we have a number of questions. I'm going to weave 2 of them together. And it says, does New Hampshire have any school choice laws in place? And what can parents do to make state and or local district offer choices or options? So if you could adjust that, I think that'd be a great place to start, because we've been talking about options in the education ecosystem. Frank, what's going on in New Hampshire in terms of law, and what does the state or school districts offer? What do they offer?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I'm going to try and answer it short, but there's a lot of options actually in New Hampshire, and there's a lot of law around this. So I will try and, hit the high points, and then if folks want to drill down on that, then I'm happy to try and do that. So in terms of choice programs, I would probably start with the New Hampshire Children's Scholarship Fund. So this is a nonprofit fund that is funded through tax credits, and it is available to qualifying individuals. Generally, a qualifying individual is someone who has a adjusted gross income of 300% or less of the federal poverty level. So it's really targeted at economically disadvantaged households. And it is available to them at various levels, depending upon what the need is. The scholarship organization is the one that does the adjudication as to what that need might be. And those funds through the scholarship program can be used in, I don't know if you remember the 3 different educational programs that we had before. We've got, public, traditional, and charter. We've got private, and we've got homeschool. And so typically this can be used, it actually, by law, it can probably use it any one of those 3, but generally is used either at a private school, and that includes both secular and religious schools in New Hampshire, or it can be used for a home education program. So it has a lot of latitude and flexibility in terms of how that can be used. Then within our state law, we also have a great deal of flexibility at the local school district level in terms of how a district may want to deploy the tax revenues that they receive for their students to be able to help educate those kids. And I'll give you some examples because we see it across the board. There is a statute, it's RSA 193 1. And actually it's 193.1, change of school assignment. Yes. 193.1, and it is dealing with, we have a couple of things in that statute. One is referred to as a manifest education hardship. So if a parent thinks that a particular educational setting is not appropriate for their child, they have the ability to make application to the local school board, which has appellate rights up to the State Board of Education, to try and obtain a placement in another school setting. And again, broad flexibility in terms of how that school board might make that determination. We also have in that same section of law something that's referred to as best interest of a child. So a superintendent working with their local school board, even if there's not a manifest education hardship, might adjudicate that it's in the best interest of the child that they have a different school setting or instructional setting. And so they have the ability to assign them to another school. And then a third area in that particular part of the statute is sometimes referred to as SB 8 because that was the law that actually ultimately ended up in it getting passed. But it is really around if a district, and we have a number of rural districts, so if a district does not have its own school in that system, so oftentimes in some of our rural districts, we may have an elementary school, maybe there's a middle school, maybe they don't have a high school and they go to a regional high school. So any district that does not have a school has the ability to enter into a tuition agreement with another school, including private school in the state of New Hampshire, to be able to send their children to that school. And really what you'll see is through these options, we've got tuition agreements in the state where you've got districts that are sending their students to private schools, and we've contracted with private schools. You'll also see that it's not at all unusual for students to be assigned to a private provider, and we see this particularly a lot in the special education realm. And oftentimes what happens is folks think that's somehow separate, but it's really the same kind of process that school districts are regularly sending their students to both residential and non-residential private homes, because that's the best interest of the child and where the child's needs can be met. And so those are probably some of the best summary in terms of options that are available within a school assignment. And I'm going to just go a little bit further and make a plug for a couple of other programs. So that's really associated with that school and that assignment. We also have another program in the state which is new to the state. It's referred to as Learn Everywhere. And so Learn Everywhere was just recently passed into law. And so that allows an opportunity for a student to earn up to 1/3 of their high school credits leading to graduation from a program that would be approved by the Department of Education. So for example, we've got an employer in our state, BAE, which is a large manufacturing company. They offer a program called Women in Technology. Lovely program. Love speaking at their graduation. It is a 16-week program for young ladies to get training in engineering and engineering processes, as well as some specific technology. So as a Learn Everywhere program, and although this is a new program, so this has not been set up, but this would be an example, that would be eligible for a student to actually earn engineering high school credit, as one example of what might take place. You can also then take that same Learn Everywhere kind of an approach, and let's say you have a student who is a high-performing soccer star, right? And they're, you know, practicing and working out on a travel team. You know, assuming that that travel team can offer, you know, a complete physical education credit, the student would be able to earn their education credit by participating in something else that's outside of that traditional educational environment that we've described. So lots of positive and opportunities for choice in the system. What you'll find is probably the biggest impediment to letting that choice be manifest is, you know, the funding associated with that traditional school, which generally has the bulk of funding associated with those dollars. And so how do those get moved around? So I'll just stop there, and those are some opportunities here in New Hampshire.
So Frank, to follow up on this, I'd love to ask a question here. Are those funds limited to the state of New Hampshire? In other words, I've done some tutoring with kids who are on U.S. Junior National Olympic team who are training, say, for skiing in Colorado. So they're at a facility in Colorado doing their learning, but they're New Hampshire kids. Would those funds be able to go to a program that's out of state necessarily?
So again, the district has the broad flexibility to be able to assign those program dollars to a program that's out of state. And again, you know, I'm going to use my you know, student with an individual education program as an example. It's not uncommon for a student with an individual education program to be assigned to an out-of-state program, quite often in Massachusetts or in Vermont or in New York. So yes, there's not a prohibition on those, you know, those program dollars necessarily crossing a border.
Okay, great, excellent. So those are some very specifics for New Hampshire law, and guys in New Hampshire, if you're looking for your kids, I think it sounds like we need to go to the local school district to follow up. And speaking of private institutions, let me follow up with Dr. Brake. We have a question about if any of, say, anyone in New Hampshire or anywhere would like to take courses at St. Michael Academy, for example. We talked about your classical curriculum,
Right,
which
sure. Well, sure, I'd like to respond to that, but first, I just want to say I'm really jealous of Frank in New Hampshire. I wish we had those programs in the state of Michigan, and maybe someday, some way. But right now, what we do, obviously, we're a small school, and most of our instruction goes to kids in kind of this Emmett County, Charlevoix County area. But we have done some experimentation both before COVID and during COVID to actually provide some instruction for people outside of our school. So we have a homeschool community that's pretty active in our area. And so last year we began to kind of offer a la carte elective courses. So if they wanted to take our courses, not be full-time, but be part-time, they were allowed to do that. And then we had, during COVID, we had 3 families from Sheboygan and Alpena, which are areas kind of more toward Lake Huron and eastern part of the northern half of Michigan. And they were interested in kind of experimenting. Their public schools they were not really doing a whole lot. And so we allowed them to audit our courses for free. And one of the families actually thinking pretty seriously about attending our school. So it's got us thinking, you know, if we can do that, you know, for for folks that are maybe 30, 40, 50 miles, you could do it anywhere, right? You can do it anywhere. So, but
Learning
the issue,
everywhere.
of course, we need marketing and things of that nature. And we also probably need some better cameras, and, you know, you got to plus up your facility a little bit to do that. But theoretically,
Yeah, I
we
think
can do this anywhere. So
I think, for example, right now, my Wi-Fi is getting a little glitchy. I'm here in Merrimack, New Hampshire tonight. Everybody, I was in Michigan last week, but I'm back in the 603, and I don't know what's up with my Wi-Fi. It's getting a little glitchy, but yeah, we definitely want to have a beefed up connectivity.
right. Well, and, you
Diane,
know,
to
if somebody
kind of
from New Hampshire would
slide
want
over
to take
to-
our course, that'd be great too.
Also some storms out there. That's what you've got. This is stormy.
I think
This
so, yeah.
thing
It was pretty
happening.
dark clouds just a little bit ago, right? So Diane, to follow up with you, you know, we know that you represent a learning community, and what I think is a beautiful non-coercive education. But would you address? I have a couple of concerns, or not concerns, but questions. Families who might be considering participating through Big Fish, no matter where they are in the state of New Hampshire, or anywhere in the country for that matter, and you're part of a network of learning communities. But the questions that I have, I think I want to start out with for you is, as a non-school learning community, how do students satisfy state requirements for high school credits for graduation? And does Big Fish actually give diplomas?
Okay. Great question. So we do not give diplomas. We don't give credits or grades even. We are, think of us in terms of like a YMCA for the mind, body, and soul. Okay, so it's kind of like they show up, we support. So our students are registered homeschoolers. However, now that COVID has hit, we are accepting some students who are in remote programs and want a supplemental kind of experience. So we have a couple of students who have just come on part-time because they're interested in some really cool classes we have going, whether it be sign language or cooking or herbal remedies you can find locally in your own woods. You know, we have lots of high interest classes that have been requested by the students. So truly, we're trying to flip the paradigm. And I actually, a friend of mine was taking an international curriculum class recently, and I said to him at a gathering of the Big Fish graduates, unquote, I said, well, that's my least favorite subject after teaching for 30 years. And he said, well, now I know why. It's because the curriculums, you know, the coercive nature of curriculum, assuming that we as adults know everything that kids should know and be able to do, is soul crushing for these little humans. So the idea is, and I think parents are starting to see it, I don't sound like a crazy person as much as I did a year or two ago. And one of the questions in your strand was about that too. What about young kids? Can they handle this? Yes, we want to learn as a species. I've never met a dropout who didn't want something more for himself or herself. I mean, people don't drop out because they don't want to learn. They drop out because the environment is not, it doesn't work. It's growing sunflowers in the woods. You know, I mean, this is where we've got to use IEP. The goal really is to have every human has his or her own IEP supported and directed by mentors and family, because family is important. That, you know, your family might want that classical education. Your family might really, you know, you're going to West Point, or, you know, my brother's kids all went to the IBs and they went to private middle school on up, you know, to get ready. That was their values, and their kids embrace those values. But there are some people who just will not thrive. So as far as getting a diploma, we've moved on a few kids. We've only been open 2.5 years, but 4 of our kids have moved on, and 3 out of the 4 have constructed a homeschool diploma, which is lots of different ways to do that. So that's a super fun project to get into. If you're one of those parents, we help them do this. Just because we do self-directed doesn't mean we make kids do everything by themselves.
Sure.
It's like when your wife or your husband, or not to be sexist about it, makes a doctor's appointment for you, or, you know, does the taxes. We help each other do these things. So all in all, we're looking for students to be harnessed by their interests. I met with a 17-year-old young man today who refuses to go back to school. He had already hated it to begin with, and then when COVID hit, he hated it more.
Yeah.
And over this summer, he's beginning to figure out what he actually likes to do. So he's going to start at Big Fish. And, he's going to lead with his interest in music and writing and art. And who knows? I said, you could end up in some anatomy class, like, oh my gosh, I want to be a nurse, or I want to be a doctor. You just don't know. We have these beautiful people who come to us every day. And that's where I think schools are figuring out is like, what is it families need? Right now, they need childcare, right? And we'll get into that. I know I'm on a tangent, but I think we don't count credits. So that's, we support.
Well, Felix, I don't know, could I respond to that maybe a little bit? I mean, it's very similar, we're a formal school and we do give credits, but we're not accredited. We're working toward that. We're recognized as an official non-public school in the state of Michigan. But, this idea that, I guess the proof has been in the pudding. Kids who've gone to our school, some of them go on to college. I guess most do. But I would say about a third of our kids either do a junior college experience or go to a welding. There's a great welding program right nearby our school. I mean, we think that you can be liberally educated and be an electrician, a plumber. And, I always joke, I should have been a plumber. They make a lot more money than, principals at classical Catholic schools. So point is, I think you're totally right. The whole paradigm needs to shift toward not what's best for schools, but what's best for families and students. And when you start doing those kinds of things, I mean, who cares? At the end of the day, as long as they can go, you can give them something that can help them, go on to the next step and find their vocation and find their passion. So
I think that's a perfect segue to Sharon as far as finding their vocation. And this is something that Sharon does a lot. And I want to piggyback also on the age issue that Diane addressed briefly. One of the questions for Sharon is at what age do you start working with children, and how exactly do you help kids decide on college and career, especially when they have many and varied interests and talents and just don't know which way to go? Sometimes we talk about kids who definitely know where they want to go, but I've worked with a lot of kids who are extremely talented, and the biggest challenge to them is they have too many options. They don't know where to go. So Sharon, how do you work with these students?
So for me, I look at it as many of these students, we have this concept of you've got to know where you're going. We've got to know what your major is. You've got to know what the agenda is. And we forget the concept that there are so many careers that are about to be created. If we think about the student today who is a college junior, they are the first generation who's lived their entire life with Google and all of the careers and all of the pathways associated with it. So we have no idea of what that next big thing is. So what we really need to develop in these students is critical thinkers. Students that have an eye open and know that there are many pathways to look at as they get ready to move forward. So when I start working with a student, the youngest I've worked with was actually a 7th grader, and I followed her through, and she's currently, and this was my recommendation, she's at a community college in New Hampshire, because everybody doesn't need to take the traditional path. For her, that was the perfect path. She actually ended up with an offer to go to a boarding school, but she chose to stay in the public school system and work through it. And now she's in the community college. This will be she'll finish up in December and move on. But for students, you've got to realize that when you go and you make your plan to move on to a college or a university, if that is your path, it's not about what your major is, because there are many options. So how do you know what the next big thing is out there? So when you enter a college, you've got to be thinking, I might be interested in this field, I might be interested in that, but how do you combine your interest and what the potential opportunities are? And so when I start working with the students, I want to really, I call it the deep dive. I call it, the debrief. You give me everything that you are doing now and everything you desire to do. What is your dream? And to include a student who said, I want to be an art teacher, and her parents were saying, no way am I sending my daughter off to be an art teacher. I'm not paying for that. She has graduated from a school. She, in her first semester, ended up getting, I paired her with a institution, a college that offered business, which is what she decided to go for because she had a lot of interest. But I found a combined school nearby that all the credits would transfer, which was an art school. And in her first semester, she won a scholarship. She ended up winning an art glass blowing competition. But it was her interest. She came back and said to me when I met her, I've always wanted to learn to blow glass, but it's something that I know I'll never get an opportunity to do. She said that to me when she was in 10th grade. I kept that in the back of my brain and said, let's figure this out. We found a camp that offered glass blowing to teenagers. She did that. She still loved it. We found a college and then paired it with a art school where all the credits transferred back. She won a $6,000 first place award for glass blowing. And she still does that. Her parents say that should have paid for her college education because she still does glass blowing. But she currently is back here in New Hampshire and loves the community, loves New Hampshire, but she's still trying to tie. How do I tie my business, my business desire to build my glass blowing business? But also she's working for one of our local companies. So it's about helping students to understand that success doesn't always come with what they learn in those books. It comes because they build their character by developing their interest in so many other things. And where is it going to go? What is the next big thing and how do you best prepare for it?
Awesome. Good insight. Obviously, the people who are working with you, the kids who are working with you are very lucky to have that mentorship and direction. So blowing glass, that's fantastic.
It was strange, but that's what we do even with Big Fish when we work with our students.
Just a little side note, apparently my mother's grandfather used to blow glass. And there's a little heirloom that's still in the family that's at my sister's right now. It's a piece of blown glass work that my great grandfather did.
Now, can you imagine a public school commissioner offering glass blowing? This could be the next wave of art classes.
It's fascinating.
How about as a Learn Everywhere program, Sharon?
Absolutely. They're actually one of the things that we encourage our students to do, whether it's a Big Fish or when I work with my families privately, is to go out and shadow. We have this concept, I want to be an attorney, I want to go into nursing, I want to get out and shadow the people in the industry. Meet people who are doing what you're doing. Ask the question, if you were to take this path tomorrow, what would you recommend I do to be successful? How do I make myself more competitive, be the leading candidate for that job when I come out of college? And it's worked. It's been, for me and for our students, it's been great.
But that's kind of the beauty of, and I don't want to dwell too long on Learn Everywhere, but everybody knows I'm really enthusiastic about it. But it would be really, really hard for all of my public schools to offer their students a glass blowing program, right? But there are some really, really talented glass blowers out there that would be happy to share their wisdom and their knowledge and their experience with kids. And so rather than try and say, well, no, that doesn't count because you're going to learn it someplace else, can't we harness that community resource and let it be a learning experience for those kids? And it really just binds the community together in a special way and creates opportunities for the school system and the families and the students alike. So.
Absolutely.
Well, in our little school, because a lot of parental involvement, we have a senior program where on Fridays, seniors go out and basically work at an internship. And so many of our parents are the ones that are getting them the internships, placing them, These are manufacturers and construction, engineering, what have you. And you know, they got to know how to read and write and communicate and express themselves and be confident. But once, you know, by the time they're seniors, they've kind of got that down, and they're ready to kind of dabble and experiment. We had a young lady who got a full ride scholarship in architecture, and I'm convinced it's because of her project that she did 1 day a week for the whole year with this, just basically being an apprentice architect. It was wonderful.
Real world experience.
Yeah, we're shifting like the how we look at school with Learn Everywhere and having kind of an unconventional state commissioner, really. I can honestly say that, right? Is that because Frank likes to think out of the box. And so if we have the opportunities for young people to be around professionals or tradespeople, artists, there's something magical that happens because kids sometimes get tracked in, you know, at 13 or 14, this is who I am. I'm going to go, my parents say, you know, I'm probably going to be this, you know, I'm going to go to med school, or I'm going to be a teacher, or whatever it is, without really exploring possibilities and knowing what's you know, out there that's new. And so I think that when we had the very first young man I met when I started exploring this network was convinced he was going to be an architect. And he said he spent freshman and sophomore year at North Star, our sort of, you know, hub in Massachusetts. And he, after the second year of mentoring with an architect once a week and all of that, he was done. Oh, I'm so glad I did that. And he developed this class, yoga exercise that he started doing for the community. And then he went out to Colorado to study exercise fitness and physiology. So, you know, you just like exposure is everything. And I think in the last 20 years, we've become so results oriented that we've limited our kids' experiences. And we've anesthetized them, and I use that word, we've anesthetized them so they'd be showing up in a lot of classes going, oh, what do they want me to do now? Mm-hmm. And in the spirit of that, last Friday we lost our guru. Sir Ken Robinson passed away of cancer. He was 70 years old. I know, it's awful. I was like, but it's terrible. He's an amazing human being. If you haven't heard or read things by him, Sir Ken Robinson, I bet most of you have, but I think it's important right now during COVID for everybody to sort of watch that and say, because all of our systems are 20th century maxing out. The school system just happens to be one of them, you know, the economy, the healthcare, the food. So I'm excited for us. I'm excited for all of us. And because we are going to figure out how to make it different. It is the paradigm shift, like you said, Dr. Brake. It truly is that. And I give you credit for having that accredited school, because it doesn't matter. Like who decides, right?
Right. I haven't been asked once by a parent whether it mattered or not. What did Edison say? I found 599 ways how not to make a light bulb, right?
Right.
I mean, sometimes you got to know what you don't like to do, right? And so being exposed to things that you don't know, that's half the battle as well. So.
Well, yeah. I think what it is you've got students who lead their education. Diane, you could speak more to it, but we've got a student who's quite young and his passion is prosthetics. So how do you put a student into a public school whose passion is learning about prosthetics, the history of how it can benefit our veterans? What can I do to support people who wear them? What can I do to develop the next generation? What grade would he be?
He would be a sophomore. He'd be 10th grade. Yeah, he came to us as a freshman.
And so here you've got a student who, how would he have survived in the traditional system when that's his passion? Everything that he does in terms of research, in terms of his mathematics is built around, how do I measure this? How can I make it ergonomically correct? What can I do? That's the opportunity that a student might have at Big Fish.
And the shift that needs to happen is about that idea of it's the judgment. And Ken says it great in his book. He's like, we offer these things without scolding, without judgment, without shame. You know, the shame piece is huge, you know, where, oh, you're better than that kid, you know, and that kid's better than you. And it's all of that that really is destructive to us as humans if we showed up for them and we didn't focus on their deficits. That will happen in time, because I think families are learning this because we're spending more time together than we ever thought we would.
Well, just listening to you two ladies talk, the other thing that kind of just comes out at me, and I think we've got it too, but these kids are mature. These kids can I mean, we you know, in some ways we kind of have arrested development for a lot of these kids, but we don't give them an opportunity to grow up, right? And we keep them kind of on this treadmill, and you know, it's no wonder they hate what they do.
One of Ken Robinson's points always was that we have infantilized our children. And, you know, so you have, I've had many 13 and 14-year-old students who are far better critical thinkers, readers, and writers than people I'm working with, you know, because that's just who they are. They're just on a different track. And one of the things I know we need to work on on legislation is in New Hampshire, they raised the compulsory age to 18. This has got to go away. GED, you have to get permission to take it before you're 18. We really need to say, you know, at the end of 10th grade, you know, have at it. And come back.
So I would like to follow up then with Frank, the idea of all of these wonderful opportunities that Sharon and Diane and Dr. Brake are talking about, just fantastic real world opportunities. And Frank, it kind of piggybacks on the learning everywhere idea. I have a question in terms of New Hampshire that says, right now, legal schools are defined in a very specific way as brick and mortar. And so what I want to know, if the New Hampshire law allows for a legal school that is not necessarily online school, but is not necessarily brick and mortar either. In other words, if we are learning everywhere out in the real world, does a school have to be defined by walls? I think of the school at Athens. The school was the people, right? The school was the teacher and learners, and they sat in the streets. So Frank, if you can address that as far as the state of New Hampshire is concerned, what is available? Does the state allow for schools to be legal schools that are not brick and mortar or online?
Oh, so not brick and mortar or online. So actually, I'll tell you, so this is I appreciate the question. I don't know that I'm fully versed on that section of the law. I haven't had to look at it for a little bit. But I would tell you, I don't think that we have that kind of a limitation. I mean, so we know about brick and mortar schools. We know about VLAC. So we have a virtual learning academy. And so I do think that there is opportunities for a school to be more associated with a community than a facility. And so the only thing that you would have to, from a strictly legal standpoint, and this is probably way wonkier than anybody's interested in. I mean, so if you're going to form a private school, if you are in a facility, then that facility has to meet certain fire safety, codes, right? But that applies whether you're a school or you're a coffee shop, right? Like that's not unique to being a school. That's just basic general safety in our communities. So that's probably as far as I'm able to weigh in on that at this point in time. And I appreciate the question, and I can try and get some feedback. But we have to be really careful when we go down this pathway, which often happens, and that is the conflating, really, of the legal structures that we talked about and the instructional models, right? So again, legal structures are, I got a public school, traditional and charter, I got a private school, and I've got a home education. So students between the ages of 6 and 18, sorry, Dan, we'll work on the 18, have a compulsory education requirement that they have to fill. But as an example, I've done, several seminars, and I think I have 2 of them tomorrow night, dealing with what are, coming up as and they're reflected as learning pods. I was going to say micro schools, but learning pods, micro schools, and those are legitimate. But again, don't conflate those with the other model. Like, so, a public school, and in fact, some conversations are taking place even now. I've got traditional public schools that are trying to accommodate families who can't work with the hybrid instruction model that they have come up with. And so they're saying, okay, you can stay a member of our school community and you will be learning in this pod or this micro school, which is a group of individuals that are getting together in order to be able to learn. I mean, I can share an example. I might have shared this on the last call, so I apologize if I'm being redundant here. Actually, Diana, over in your area over there, we had students, the school goes to a hybrid or remote instruction model, and 16 families say like, hey, this isn't really going to work for our families. So we're going to be meeting in a local church and accessing our remote instruction with our teachers in school, but we'll be getting together in 2 clusters of 8 kids who are going to get together. So they're part of a legal structure. We've got responsibility and accountability associated with that school, but they can get together in that community. But I think of that as more of an instructional model than a school.
Support. It's another form of support.
Okay.
Yeah, right. They're like para-educators in a way.
Okay, so again, just an idea that I've had, Frank, just to follow up on this a little bit, is, you know, in terms of micro schools or pods or learning communities, the opportunity for kids to actually be out in the world. And one of my mantras has always been, if we want our children to become world-class students, then they need to get out into the world. And so that's one of the reasons I thought about, and I've taken my students to different parts of the world at the different public high schools I've taught. I've taken my students on trips during spring break and so forth. And the thought occurred to me, wouldn't it be great if I could have a small group of students that literally traveled across the country and visited the historical sites as they learned the history, or traveled to different parts of the world as part of their school year. And this is something that I've been working on. I had it really pretty much well defined with organizations ready to support it, and then COVID. But
So just to reflect on that, like, in other words, like, so what you're proposing is really just pushing out thought processes that exist already. I mean, as you described, you have been involved in a traditional public school environment that took a school trip. I don't know where you went, Uruguay, right? You took a group of kids down there for 10 days. Well, if you can take them down for 10 days, why can't you take them down there for 10 months if you wanted to? I mean, there's not a prohibition on that, right? Obviously, everybody would want to just like look at the program and understand that it's going to be safe and that we're not doing anything crazy or something like that. But that's not, I mean, how does it differ if you take kids on a certain 10-day trip or you take them on a 10-month trip? It seems to me that those are the same ideas. It's just pushing out the idea.
Well, and especially if you're working with a homeschool network, then again, Frank's idea that there's instructional models and then legal institutions. According to New Hampshire, homeschool is a homeschool, and then I guess if you could sell that to a homeschool consortium, I bet they'd be interested.
Yeah, Blake Bowles does this. He takes kids to Machu Picchu and the Camino in Spain. This is obviously pre-COVID. He does it almost like the gap year thing.
Yeah, right.
And he's actually started a micro school that I just launched. Have you met Blake, Frank? And Blake?
I don't think I've met him, no.
No, I'll
have to do that. Yeah.
Put his pod. He's a big friend of Liberated Learners and Arrow, and he was a homeschooler himself, but he takes kids all over the world, and he's written a couple of books. One of his books is called College Without High School.
Yeah, right. We've been dabbling with the idea of a study abroad program at St. Michael Academy. Not just
maybe we can follow up on it.
We have exchange students and all. We had 3 last year, but I mean, how about somebody from downstate? How about somebody from Wisconsin?
Yeah. We should follow up on that, Doctor.
Let me just jump in for 1 second. I just want to clarify. And so this is I just want to make sure that I'm clear about this. Like, so that idea of 10 days or 10 months can happen in a traditional school model, right? It can happen in a charter school model, a private school model, or a home education model. Like any of those systems in New Hampshire can help. It can support that, really. So
that's awesome.
So we'll talk about that more, Dr. Rick, when I get back to Michigan about how that might work.
Yeah, sure.
So I can share my, I have two daughters. When they went to a private school here in New Hampshire, there was a movie that came out, American Treasure. And we are about history in this house. So we've always been fascinated. And so many of the children in this school had never been to Philadelphia or Washington, D.C.
Right.
So we worked with the school to put together an actual field trip where they would take the field trip and follow the map.
Yeah.
And the students were fascinated at the prospect.
Yeah.
And we were originally offering it for the entire class. There were hesitancy, so we were able to get a significant number of the students interested. It didn't happen the year we wanted. It ended up happening the year after my daughter left. But we put it in place. We found the resources. We had families willing to sponsor other students because it was about exploring history and making it alive for these students.
Right.
And when you do that, it transforms the world for them. Three of them now work in Washington, D.C.
That's awesome.
So I just look back and think about that.
I'd like to come back to Frank again real quickly, because I think one of the hard questions that I think that came in for you is, you talked about there's nothing that prevents school districts from doing these things.
I didn't say there's nothing that prevents, there's no legal impediments to doing it. There's plenty that prevent it, otherwise it'd be happening ubiquitously.
Excuse me, I should be clear. No legal impediments is the perfect language. But the question is, what can parents do to, I don't want to say force, but force the local school districts to let the tuition dollars offer something that Diane is doing or Dr. Brake's group is doing?
Yeah. I have a suggestion.
Is there anything families can do to force that?
So do I chime in on my suggestion? Because we've talked with families all the time, and I think we'll change the language to right now COVID is educating all of us, and I think it's exposing what it is schools can't offer, which is everything, which is they try to offer everything and they can't, right? So I don't want to be in a force mode with school districts. I want for them to think about how they can actually make a river to this ecosystem, right? And it starts, and I think we're maybe going to get closer to talking about it at Dover. I haven't met with Bill in a couple of months, but the idea of not just Big Fish, but, the Science Center and, all of these places. But it comes with community conversations. And really, there is so much local control in New Hampshire. I was in Maine forever. It was much more local control in New Hampshire. So I think it really is about getting to know your school board, your administrators, the flavor of the town, and then just really being truly transparent. Because if you have a kid who won't go to school because they can't, they just can't. And maybe, there's so much anxiety, or there's whatever there is. I mean, there are 1,000 or 1,000,000 reasons. But I think the schools are seeing more and more, like, there are plenty of kids to go around. And what we've done is we've put all the resources into public school. And so, I'm still mystified. And I think Dr. Harburn in the beginning, really, he loves what we're doing. He still does. And I think he said, well, maybe we could pilot, and have like 5 or 6 kids and we'll try it out, right? But then he met with his team and the legals and nope, we got to keep it all in one system. And there's just has to be a building of trust. So I don't think it can be a force. I think it has to be a partnership. We just have to get to know these people and these families.
Well, Frank,
the families are brave.
I think I felt compelled to use the word force because I've been in the education world for 34 years, and I see things don't happen unless people make them happen.
Right.
But you have, I agree with Diane, like force is the wrong approach. I've had many conversations, probably countless conversations with parents, looking for options. And what I try to do is to, I give them the 3 structures, but I'm like, have you talked to your superintendent? Have you talked to your principal? And you explain to them, this is why what you're doing is not working for my family, right? Like, and maybe it's, the instructional model, maybe it's, I've got to go to work and I got to be, and I can't afford to, keep an eye on my 3rd grader, 3 days a week. What else can you offer me? I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I spoke with one superintendent and walked him through the idea of, one of the Prenda school type pods, micro schools. And he was very grateful. He was like, well, this is another tool that I have in my toolbox. The hard part, and I think that Diane appreciates this, and I don't know the secret. I know that force is probably not the ultimate solution, but it's hard for them to make the step from having a tool in their toolbox to letting go, right? And allowing that to evolve and to happen.
Well, the fears are that it's going to create, this max exodus from, it's not, right?
It's the precedent.
Right. And the precedent of also like, oh my God, that means any Yahoo isn't a highly, qualified teacher. But they also have something called community resources. And I've sat in, most of the IEP meetings I've sat in my life have been in Maine, but it's similar, is that I know from the hundreds that I've sat in, is that a group of educators and, the administrators, they can make anything happen for a kid. So we have a student who is on the spectrum, is highly intelligent, very anxious. He came to Big Fish and did really well, just moved into the district, got his assessment. Dover is all about accommodating kids. They offered him placement in a private setting that is $60,000 a year and transportation, which is like 65 miles away. Yet they won't offer a community resource like Big Fish for $9,000. So I think as we have these conversations and we get these families, because these parents are now willing to talk, and it's the spectrum community is really going to lead us.
That's one of the reasons why I think I fell back on the word force, is because I didn't like using the word, but
no, but you're right.
I've been around long enough. It's really tough to break that old paradigm of thinking that still exists.
Well, it's a very poignant subject, actually. I was on my local school board, but at the same time, my youngest son was going through high school and dealt with anxiety and stuff like that. And so we were just struggling with him. And, I don't think that I could have, it didn't happen. We tried our best to create kind of a flexible approach, and, thank God he got through it. But I think there's opportunities with this COVID stuff. I think that this is kind of a forcing action, and these pods are just, it's fascinating. I was, talking to some people back home, and it was like, they're doing that kind of thing because these kids, some of them do okay with the online, some don't. And so they need help. So but that was just 4 or 5 years ago. So things are really, it's remarkable what we can talk about now that we couldn't talk about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sharon. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just heard from a family today, a student that was actually out of Dover, who connected with him in his first semester junior year with a 1.9 GPA and was never able to utilize his support system, didn't know how, wasn't confident enough. The school district randomly hired a new aide that supported students in their IEPs. She was a fantastic support for him. She stepped in, met him where he needed to be met. Right. This student went from a solid D student to an AB student in a semester.
Yeah.
Because he got the resources he needed to in the district, but the resource happened to be his connection with a staff person who just had a different style that worked for him.
I don't know if you can say this in the public school, but what I would say is that they got some love.
I know, but I got to agree with you.
They got
so
some
it was
love.
perfect for him.
Yeah.
And then go through, he's really built his confidence up, and he goes to meet with his guidance counselor who says, you'll never get to college, not with these grades. And he is currently starting, I got a text from his mom today. He took a course at the community college this summer.
Yeah.
And it was hard. It was unbelievably hard because he's not an online learner.
Right.
And so the big decision for the family was, do we send him off to college or do we hold off a year? But he took a course at community college, was able to pull off a B in online learning at a community college. And he is now at Lynn University in Florida, one of the best schools for students with learning differences. and he is down there. And I got a text message from Mom
All
today. I got a text message from him when he got there on the last Thursday. And he
Oh.
said, I finally met people who are like me.
Ah,
You know, and it just,
That's
each
fantastic.
student will do it in their own way.
sure.
So I appreciate that, Sharon. I think Frank is up against a hard stop tonight. So what I'd like to do is give Frank, give you an opportunity to leave some parting comments and some final thoughts. And then thank you so much for being with us, and let you take your leave after you share your final thoughts.
Great. And so thank you again for letting me join you. It is great to connect. I haven't seen Diane in a while. Sharon, I haven't seen you in a while, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Brake. I think, you guys have all alluded to this, but this pandemic that we have been going through really has created the opportunity for us to really critically look at all the different things we're doing and how we're supporting students and how we're supporting families and how we're supporting teachers throughout this process. And so I hope, and I think I shared this on the last call as well, but I'm really proud of New Hampshire and how folks have really stayed focused on the objective of, let's make sure that we're helping students succeed. And we haven't gotten into whose turf is this or that. We're just staying focused on mission. And so we just have to continue that work. And I think that there is possibly a silver lining through this pandemic if we can continue to work forward and find opportunities that really allow every student, every child to thrive. And people in New Hampshire know I like to use this term, bright futures, right? We want kids to have bright futures, and that's what we all need to continue to work towards. So thank you for letting me join you. I have shared my email in the chat box. If anyone has questions specific to New Hampshire, I apologize, I don't know all the other states' laws. Please feel free to reach out to me, and and hopefully you have a great experience as we begin to enter into this next school year, and that your kids thrive. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, Frank.
Thanks again, Frank. God bless, and thank you for all the work that you do. And if there's anything we can do as educators to support you, you call on us anytime. You have us. We'll be happy to step up and do whatever needs to be done.
Great. Thanks for arranging this whole thing, Felix. This has been great. I appreciate it.
And thank you again, everybody else, for being here. I know your rich experience has been very, very beneficial to everyone, all of our viewers. I do have a question that says, how does a parent get their child into a group that is right for them? How does a parent get a child
Answer for that.
that's right for them, for the individual child, whether it be at a St. Michael's or a Big Fish or any micro school? Diane.
Well, so if anyone who's listening in has in New Hampshire, the Granite State Homeschoolers, they have a great Facebook presence and also a website. I can paste it right here and there. So they basically they have a new there's another subgroup off of them that has a pod learning group. They actually have a Facebook page for the New Hampshire region. So it's kind of like calling all cars. I live in Kingston or I live in Dover, and I have a 5 and a 7-year-old, and we were remote learning, but I'm whatever. So that's that idea of families helping each other out. So I've just noticed that they've done a terrific job getting that going. So it's district by district. So I would recommend that.
As I hear Diane's answer to the find outs who asked the question, what I think I hear is connecting with existing groups.
Yeah.
And I would also recommend connecting with someone like Sharon Harris, who has a wealth of experience in terms of helping kids get into programs that do fit them. And through her connection, she may know someone. So everything always boils down to people and talking to the right people. And Sharon, do you have anything to add?
Well, I would say that there are a lot of resources out there. And, though I've been in this field for over 15 years, I don't know them all, but I'm really good at networking, which is how I've had the opportunity to meet this panel. There are people across the country, actually across the globe, that I've worked with. And I will tell you that there are people who are just as passionate about education and the success of every student as the people that are here today. And if you're doing it here in New Hampshire, if you're doing it in Michigan, there are resources. When I do my work, I know that I'm not aware of every state's law. And I will contact my resources across the country to say, hey, what's the best resources in Michigan? How do we go about doing this? And it's amazing the resources and the people that are out there that are passionate about student success. It's not about their success, it's about student success. And that's why you've got us all here tonight.
Yeah.
That's right. And I'd like to kind of end on this thought. Education is and always has been a very human endeavor. And so the best thing I can say is to connect with lots of other wonderful humans like Dr. Brake, Diane Murphy, Sharon Harris, Frank Edelblut. And I'd like to throw myself in your company as well. And please take advantage of our love and passion for kids and education. We were more than willing to create programs from out of nothing for your kids. And so now you have more people who would be more than happy to speak to your child's specific situation. Any parting thoughts from our panel? Dr. Brake?
Well, it's just been a pleasure to meet all of you. Hopefully we can do this again. And, I think that the bottom line for me is, the whole paradigm has to shift from what's best for the institution, but what's best for the family and for the student. And, I'm not saying that education is like shopping at Walmart or something, but you have to have a customer appreciation. And I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. But there's a lot of these institutions are not going to, there's vested interests. So you got to be tough too. So.
Well, thank you, Dr. Brake. Diane, parting thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we just keep telling our stories. This is the stories are what changes things. And so we are in the midst of relearning how to take care of each other. And I really encourage the parents who have kids who are not getting their needs met. I'm not about suing schools. I hate it when I hear about people. I didn't even know you could do that. Like when I first started teaching, I'm like, oh, you can do that. Yes, I mean, that's a problem. But for parents to really advocate, and even if they can't because they're too busy, to find people like us who can help them. Because I know schools they do want to shift. It's just, it's a model that it's like, it needs to be rebuilt. So
aircraft carrier around, it's hard.
I don't know any teacher who doesn't believe that to be true, or administrator for that matter. It's just that we're stuck. But now I think, like you said, with COVID, there are going to be many silver linings from this. And I just encourage people to get out there and tell their stories. It's those stories, and I know, hi Donna, I see you on there. People have been through a lot, and if Donna has some really wonderful, interesting children, and for you to talk about your kids to like a local school board or people like us, that's when change happens. So Sharon, you're up.
We got, by the way, Dr. Brake and Diane Murphy. You got an amen from the audience, so appreciate it.
I'm not preaching, I don't think.
My mother told me I should have been a preacher. I don't know.
And Sharon, I'll let you have the last word before I say goodbye to everyone.
I would just share and jump on the same bandwagon. We're all here because we're here for the kids. I mean, I get excited to see these students succeed, and we all do. And whatever it takes, sometimes I know we're probably being pulled back by our significant others to say, wait a second, breathe. But we breathe, and sometimes it's breathing for these kids. And I consider myself lucky to be able to do that, in that I'm not bound by the system that holds me back.
Yeah.
I can buy in and say, what do these students need to succeed? And their success is my success. And that's what I think you're getting from all the people here.
Yeah.
as we get excited by seeing these students succeed.
Very good. I thank you all so much. And I agree, Dr. Brake. I think I would love to continue the conversation, even if we don't get Commissioner Edelblut involved, because he's a busy guy doing other things. So I'm really happy he was able to join us twice. And but there's nothing to stop us from keeping the conversation going and networking. And obviously, I'm going to be following up with all of you to make sure that we link arms and work together for all the students in New
Thank
Hampshire.
you, Felix. Thank you, Felix, for your
Thank you
leadership
so
on that.
much for setting this up. And it'll be interesting to see where everyone's at the next time we meet, because I think the next month or two, the next month is going to be
Who knows?
really interesting.
Yeah,
It'll be
That's
interesting to follow up.
agreed.
God
All
bless
right.
you all.
All right, everybody. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Great
Take
evening.
care. Thanks, Shauna. See you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Felix.